let us start right away. Let me first welcome our board members. We've got our Emeritus Chairperson, Dave Stewart. Dave, welcome. We also have Christina Teichmann, one of our board members. And then we've got our staff right here in front. They can introduce themselves later. Welcome to you. And the three gentlemen on that side flew in this morning from wherever, and so I'm very, very happy. And as you can see, the idea today is to give, now I need to get my terminologies right because I'm a baby boomer. So we've got Generation Z and our millennials right here in front. And the idea is for them to speak their mind on constitutional matters this morning. And baby boomers, we will add our voice as the day progresses. Then I also would like to just welcome our journalists from Network 24, Rapport, The Citizen, and others. Welcome to you. And then we've got a representative from the Klerk Foundation. Welcome, sir. We also have Mr. Singh from the IFP. And then we've got a representative from the Swedish Embassy. Welcome, sir. So yes, I believe some people went to a different Sun Square in Gardens, but they're on their way back. So what is this day all about, ladies and gentlemen? I spent 3 days, or 2 days of the 3 in Gauteng, and the Department of Justice organized a conference on 30 years of human rights. And the idea was to dissect and to analyze and to argue, debate in terms of the successes, the challenges that we still face, and where some things went horribly off the rails. And I must say, Chief Justice Zondo delivered a very, very good speech, and he highlighted the importance of the independence of the judiciary. But he then expressed his concern about the state of our institutions and the levels of corruption, the levels of undue influence, and so forth. And he shared that in the presence of the President. We also had the Statistician General of Stats SA, and he spoke at length about what we have achieved in terms of housing, water and sanitation, electricity, and so forth. And he also highlighted the many challenges that we face. And numbers don't usually lie. And we had a lot of very good inputs from stalwarts such as Matthew Sposa and others, and from Labour as well. But ladies and gentlemen, what was my biggest takeaway? My biggest takeaway is we can talk until we blue in our face about human rights and the realization of human rights in South Africa and the Bill of Rights specifically. But if our economy is not growing, if there's no money to fund education, to fund health, and to ensure that we give expression to the Bill of Rights, then we are not going to achieve much in that space. But money is one side of the coin. I think the other side of the coin is servant leadership. We can have elections until we blow in our face, but if people that are appointed in critical positions, if they are not there to serve the country, to serve the Bill of Rights, often we want the Bill of Rights to serve us, but we have to turn our mentality around to say, to what extent do we as citizens contribute to the realization of the Bill of Rights? Then I don't think we will achieve anything, and our country will just regress. And I think that's the kind of culture, the kind of thinking that we as the foundation would like to inculcate, change the mentality, change the thinking around what we can do to serve our country. I spent 20 years in education on the Cape Flats, And the day when I arrived at the school, it looked like any other school on the Cape Flats, dilapidated, dirty, and people very much impoverished. And you know, since that first day I walked in there, I decided to change things. Started to clean the bathrooms, clean the classrooms, painted the classrooms, planted beautiful trees, fixed the sports fields, brought in computers, and just to make education something that kids can aspire to, because many of them come from very impoverished households. And the school is their only hope and the place where they can get something to eat, where they can get some love and some protection. And we allow our schools to also look like the community where these kids come from, then what are we busy with? And that is the purpose of today, you know, and that's why we have young people here to set the example, to bring about the aspiration and the inspiration for other young people to take great ownership of our Bill of Rights and then turn it around and say, but what can we do as young people to change things for the better? So Daniela has given me some notes here, and I'm not going to spend too much on this, but it's no use that we brag about the Constitution. You know, it's regarded as progressive globally, and it is internationally acclaimed, but our Constitution must become a reality for all of our people. So at this point, we have decided to assess the degree to which rights and freedoms in the Bill of Rights are being enjoyed in practice. And the report is then known as the Human Rights Report Card. And we consider the following: to what extent is government meeting its obligation in terms of Section 7 of the Constitution to respect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights? And how does the foundational values in Section 1 of the Constitution, to what extent is that being respected? Specifically, the rule of law and the supremacy of the Constitution, on which all the rights in the Bill of Rights ultimately depended. And the litmus test is based on three fundamental cornerstones. One, dignity. Second one, equality. And the third one, freedom. And if government, or even us as public sector and private sector, if we impede in any way on those rights, then we compromise the Constitution. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask my colleague, Daniela, who's also the program manager for constitutional rights, just to give you the rundown in terms of how does the Human Rights Report Card work and so forth. Daniela, over to you, and best of luck to the young people over there. Right, one day you will look like me, but don't despair.
Good morning, esteemed guests. As Christo said, I am Daniela Ellebeck. I'm the Constitutional Programs Manager at the Foundation. I am also an attorney. So, as Christo stated, every year, this report card assesses the degree to which rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution are being enjoyed in practice. Because we've got this wonderful Constitution, but is it a lived reality? Again, the Foundation's vision is to make our constitutional democracy a lived reality for South Africans. So the following are what the Foundation identified as the 10 constitutional rights that are most under threat. Now, firstly is the right to life. Threats include the escalating murder rates, indicative of systemic failures in law enforcement and crime prevention, firearm mismanagement, with over 1,000 murders being linked to police-issued firearms since 2016, and SAPS officials admitting during the course of 2023 to selling guns to criminal gangs, combined with inefficiencies in law enforcement and systemic failures in other government services such as healthcare and water access, exemplified, for example, by the Hammanskraal water scandal in Gauteng that sent shockwaves through the country, with a major cholera outbreak arising from the neglect of the water infrastructure in Hammanskraal that caused the death of 23 people, with a further 229 being hospitalized. So we've got escalating murder rates, a struggling law enforcement system, firearm mismanagement in the law enforcement system, inefficiencies in government services, some even leading to deaths of people because they couldn't drink the tap water. All of this led to the right to life being significantly threatened in 2023, leading to it being awarded an E-. Now, we graded the rights A through E. A, you will see from your summary sheet, if you turn to page 3, is excellent. In other words, that right is being enjoyed very well in practice. B, okay, in practice it's being enjoyed good. C is moderate, D is poor, E is very bad. And then we would award a plus, equal, or minus sign. Plus would show that there was improvement, equal, no change, and minus is deterioration. So the right to life was awarded an E-, which is very bad and deteriorating. From last year's report, you would see it was awarded an E equals, in other words, no change. So turning to the second right that is very much under threat is healthcare, food, water, and social security. So healthcare is severely threatened by the National Health Insurance Bill, the NHI, that everyone would know about by now. And the NHI embodies severe uncertainties, like the procurement of funds to finance the universal healthcare coverage, which greatly risks limiting the right to access to healthcare that the Constitution enshrines in Section 27, as well as the destruction of the private healthcare sector. Food. So according to news reports last year, food inflation hit a 14-year high at 13.4%, making access to sufficient food all the more difficult for South Africans. When it comes to water, we've already mentioned the Hammanskraal water crisis in Gauteng, where people died from contaminated water. On top of this, we also have the Department of Water and Sanitation's 2023 Blue Drop report, which found that less than half of South Africa's drinking water is safe for consumption. Now, again, the Hammanskraal water crisis, which saw residents being asked to refrain from drinking tap water, accentuates these dangers. And when it comes to social security, the last aspect of this right, South Africa has one of the world's most expansive social grant systems, with 47% of the population relying on monthly grants. And last year, SASSA, responsible for paying these grants, failed to pay these beneficiaries on time, with money running out at multiple sites. Many beneficiaries, including pensioners, had to resort to camping outside of SASSA's offices. Now, all of this contributed to this right being graded as E, very bad. Turning to inequality, South Africa's constitution says that we are a country founded on the value of non-racialism. However, the Employment Equity Amendment Act of 2023 and regulations made in terms thereof risks unfairly discriminating against South Africans based on their race and perpetuating rather than solving racial inequalities in employment and impeding social cohesion and economic progress. My learned colleagues will talk about how the results of some of the draft regulations made in terms of this act would have resulted in what the regulations call coloured and Indian people being virtually unemployed in a number of provinces. The water regulations proposed in 2023 would introduce race-based water quotas for use. So depending on the size of their water needs, farmers or companies not meeting the prescribed racial share allocation, ranging from a quarter, 25%, to 3/4, 75% of what the regulations term as black people, would face denial of access to water. So farmers, regardless of their contribution to food production, may face water restrictions based on their race, potentially leading to food insecurity in a country already struggling to meet the basic right of access to sufficient food. Now, these regulations would also lead to widespread job losses in the agricultural sector as well as the mining sector. So all of this led to the right to equality and its enjoyment as a lived reality, remaining being graded as E-, very bad with deterioration. Turning to property rights, the expropriation bill, which many of you will know, was passed last night by Parliament's second house and sent to the first house for concurrence, attempts to allow for expropriation without compensation. In other words, the government can take private property without paying any money for it. Now, this will undermine the right to property and threaten citizens' economic stability, disencourage investment in the already struggling South African economy, and undermine confidence in the rule of law, as the Constitution was expressly not amended to allow for expropriation without compensation. So all of this saw the right to property being awarded a D grade, in other words, poor. Turning educational concerns, as pointed out by my Executive Director, Christo, education is a primary concern for South Africans and for many the only hope of improving their lives. Yet, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill endangers constitutional rights by centralizing control over education with the government and disempowering school governing bodies. Now, as many of you or parents will know, school governing bodies are made up of parents in that school. The majority of members on SGBs are parents. So basically what this bill wishes to do is take away power from the parents to decide which policies are in the best interest of their children in that school and how to run that school and centralize it with the government. Budget cuts have exacerbated the situation in the education sector, and this will be covered more in depth by my learned colleagues. I do wish to point out that in 2022 already, over 80% of schools were dysfunctional. Now, this all saw the right being graded as very bad with deterioration. Turning to privacy concerns, the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill has provisions for mandatory security vetting and security clearance certificates by the State Intelligence Agency. And this would include persons or institutions of national security interests, which is very widely defined and can mean anything from educational institutions to civil society organizations to journalists. And this poses a very serious threat to various rights, including the right to privacy. Now, the introduction of this bill in Parliament in 2023 saw this right being downgraded 1 degree to moderate, in other words, C. Turning to threats to freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is the cornerstone of a democracy, and it is needed for a democracy to thrive. How on earth can we expect to have a functioning democracy if we cannot talk to one another and find the way forward? Well, the hate speech bill's broad criminalization of expressions that are arguably constitutionally protected speech will be discussed more in depth by my learned colleague, Siya Kudumisa. And this criminalization of constitutionally protected speech undermines freedom of expression and inhibits open dialogue, something that is essential for our democracy to continue functioning. Now, this bill was passed by both houses of Parliament in 2023 and is currently in front of the President to be signed into law. If you are found guilty of speech that this bill sees as hate speech, bearing in mind this is defined very broadly and some would say even uncertainly in the bill because hate is even undefined, you may face up to 5 years in jail. So all of this saw the right to freedom of expression being downgraded 1 degree. Turning to threats to freedom and security of person, we've already said that threats to the right to life are one of the biggest threats facing the rights in the Constitution. So freedom and security of person follows this closely, with gender-based violence remaining a scourge. And domestic violence rates remain alarmingly high, threatening the security and well-being of citizens, especially the vulnerable, women and children. Furthermore, police inefficiencies and allegations of torture squads within the South African National Defence Force and cases revealing severe abuse, even torture within prisons, highlight systemic failures. This also the enjoyment of the right to freedom and security of person being rated as D, very bad with deterioration. Housing crisis. Now, anyone in Cape Town would have seen that we are seeing an increase in homelessness. Now, the increase in homelessness and the housing shortage across South Africa exacerbates inequality and violates the constitutional right to adequate housing. It also perpetuates social instability and impedes economic growth and progress, particularly impacting marginalized communities and vulnerable people groups. Now, South Africa's shortage of decent, affordable housing and the rising homelessness crisis saw this right being downgraded 1 degree to moderate. Lastly, environmental hazards. Various court cases during 2023 involved harmful emissions from coal plants that endanger public health and violate the constitutional right to a safe environment. Now, this disproportionately affects marginalized communities and future generations. So thank you for your kind consideration. These are the rights that are the most at threat that we identified from our report that covers the period from 1st January 2023 to 31st December 2023. I will now hand over to my learned colleague, Sean Kinneys, who will look at the macro and micro environmental factors that impacted on the enjoyment of the rights in the Bill of Rights. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. I know that
Sorry, apologies. Some of us are vertically challenged.
Thanks. I know that after probably hearing such disastrous downgrades and acts of situations of human rights decreasing, allow me to just start by saying that South Africa is still a healthy, multifunctional, and multi-party democracy with an independent judiciary. But along with this came with macro and micro issues that the country had to face, which undermined key rights such as dignity, environment, economic rights, as well as the rights to personal freedoms and protection. So, with the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, as well as the Israel-Palestine conflict, that brought about large macroeconomic shocks to food insecurity, for one. Africa was vastly affected by shocks in commodity prices, a decrease in wheat output, as well as grain. South Africa was not immune to this. This caused shocks and drastic price increases in oil, bread, wheat, in a lot of cereal products that we consume. This was one of the biggest threats as a macro issue to food insecurity in the country that has direct consequences on dignity as well as food security. Macro issues such as load shedding just add fuel to the fire. This has resulted in a down in production of food, as food output and production, especially relating to wheat, as well as egg products. Allow me to say that also we stay in an exceptionally disruptive era, and disruption needs planning. Have we planned for this? Macro issues, micro issues? Only one could only help but wonder. We know that with one of the basic cornerstones of democracy, and words of Aristotle, that a state should ultimately be judged upon its ability to provide for the most vulnerable citizens. How well are we doing in providing for our most vulnerable, with budget cuts to key sectors such as policing, food, as well as education? That's one of the things we grappled with when writing this report. It seemed daunting, but a step in the right and the wrong direction. One can then say that with the police only solving 12.3% of crimes in this country, specifically murder, what does that help in getting the average South African citizen feeling safe in their homes or going to the corner shop? So, the police has a mandate to protect, prevent, and investigate all crimes against persons and property. This has come under attack. Why? Is our ministers, where are they? Zama's running the streets, criminal gangs in the Western Cape that are being supplied by the police with illicit firearms. So the world is changing and it is disruptive. We have not planned for this disruption. Another thing, just to go back to one of the cornerstone understandings of a political society, is that the state should execute its mandates through institutionalism. How well do our institutions function? Are they able to deliver on their mandate? I doubt this for many institutions. National Treasury itself is one of the most effective institutions, achieving about 80% of its mandate, with the police, as I just referred to, only solving 12.3% of murders. So there's a large discrepancy between this. So we as South Africans live in a country where we should have agency to make informed decisions about our lives and how we choose to live it, so that we may translate that agency into influence, in a sense that we as the youth, and women in particular, must be at the table. But this is not the reality, as the median age of a politician in South Africa is 60, but the youth age in South Africa is around 19 to 24. The youth aren't at the table. Do we have agency? How can we have agency in a time when food security has experienced skyrocketing prices, and a country where the basic food basket in 2023 cost around between 3,800 and 4,200 rand? And this in a country where 17 million people are dependent on social grants, where they get amounts between 550 rand and 1,900 rand. It clearly shows that the consumer has been battened and bruised by both these macro and micro issues that our country has failed to plan for. So are we at the table or just on the menu as South Africans, as young people and as women in particular? Thank you.
The height situation. Thank you so much, Sean, for that insightful macro and macro analysis. Dear esteemed guests and learned colleagues, we are heading towards the 7 general elections that coincide with South Africa's 30 years of democracy. This makes the 2023 Human Rights Report Card assessment of the political landscape very much important. Our report divided the developments in 2023 into 2 issues, the threats and the strengths. I'll start touching on the threats. So with regards to the right to privacy, freedom of religion, belief and opinion, freedom of association and freedom of expression, which are all related to political rights, the report has found the following developments posing direct dangers to these rights being enjoyed in South Africa. The first one being the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill, GILAB, a new bill that intends to amend powers and mandates of South Africa's state intelligence services. The bill was tabled in Parliament in November 2023. While the bill aims to do some good by splitting the foreign and domestic branches of state security agency, it raises apprehensions regarding the potential infringements it has on the above-mentioned rights. The report card cautions that should the bill be passed into law, it will constitutionalize arbitrary surveillance of civilians, organizations, among others, threatening to compromise the very democratic values it aims to uphold, especially those of privacy, freedom of association, expression, religion, and political rights. The second threat that the report card has identified is that of the prevention and combating of hate crimes and hate speech bill, often known as the hate speech bill. As it just awaits to be signed into law by the president, the bill itself poses serious threats to freedom of expression. The bill aims to criminalize expressions it sees as hate speech. It ironically fails to define what hate is, as my colleague Daniela have alluded. Thus, due to its broad, vague, and secular definitions and provisions, it stands to potentially criminalize legitimate discourse and dissent which the Constitution sees as protected. It may inadvertently suppress viewpoints, as people will most likely self-censor rather than face the outlined heavy jail sentence. This trend actually inhibits open dialogue and free speech, which are all central to the ethos of democratic society and for it to function and thrive. The report card cautions, therefore, that should the bill become law, it would have a crippling effect on citizens' willingness to express themselves freely and open on controversial issues. The second issue, which is that it found, revolves around the mere fact that it protects for journalists, academics, artists, and religious freedoms, offering little real protection for speech explicitly protected in the Constitution. The second aspect in terms of political rights that we highlighted within the report card is that alludes to strength. This then shows that everything is not hopeless, though. The report card finds that 2023 came with some developments that are strengthening political rights, specifically Section 19 and the freedom of trade, occupation, and profession, which is Section 22. These include the Electoral Amendment Act, which came into effect on the 19th of April 2023, which seeks to allow independent candidates to contest provincial and national elections. As per President's remarks, the Act reflects a significant milestone in the evolution of South Africa's democracy. These developments are not only strengthening political rights or the right to equality, but they are timely considering the upcoming elections. In spite of these developments, the report card finds that the country is still battling on methods that would strike a balance between electoral regulation and the preservation of political rights. Two court cases have actually highlighted these challenges. The first being the case of Independent Candidate Association, SANPC, versus President of South Africa and others. And the second being the One Movement South Africa, NPC, versus the Republic of South Africa. Firstly, the Independent Candidate Association case challenged the Act's 200 split of seats in the National Assembly, arguing that this split favored political parties and undermined the values of voters for independent candidates. The court's ruling reaffirmed Parliament's discretion in structuring the electoral system, while emphasizing the need to balance proportionately and avoidance of overhang, ultimately determining that the split did not infringe upon political rights. Secondly, the case challenged the 15% signature requirements for independent candidates and seat allocations recalculations. The majority of the court ruled that the 15% signature requirement unjustly limits political rights, especially the freedom to make political choices and stand for public office, unfairly and arbitrarily. Since there was insufficient time for President to rectify the Act before the 2024 elections, the court has made an interim order that would apply for 24 months. That 1,000 signature requirements for contestation by independent candidates must be read in. The above cases highlight the ongoing tensions between electoral regulations and preservation of the fundamental rights, especially political rights, arguing a delicate balance to uphold democratic principles in South Africa's electoral process. And then the second development that actually appeared as a strength in terms of political rights and all associated rights was that of the implications of citizenship. The first being the losses of rights, and the second being the unregistered children. While the Supreme Court of Appeals declaration in Democratic Alliance versus Minister of Home Affairs saw immigrants with dual citizenship regain their South African citizenship, which strengthened their right to citizenship and allowed these South Africans abroad to exercise their right to vote, the ongoing challenges of more than 250,000 children being unregistered limits them to the access of healthcare, to the access of education, to the access of grants, and that actually limits them to enjoy the benefits of being South African citizens. And I now then hand over to Ismail, who will conclude the presentations this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my name is Ismail Jessup, Legal Officer of Constitutional Programs, and I'm here to bring heightened awareness to the human rights concerns that we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As we conclude the unveiling of the Human Rights Report Card 2023, we take a look at its dashboard. Its dashboard there in front of you, which is an overview of the health of each right and how these rights have changed since last year. So let us delve now into the specifics of the dashboard, analyzing each right graded in the report card and the specific developments that have led to these gradings. Now, equality, Section 9, still remains a significant challenge in South Africa, graded at E-. That means that it is graded as very bad. Now, despite efforts to address systemic inequalities, persistent disparities still exist. Race-based legislation, such as the Employment Equity Act, have raised concerns about perpetuating racial divisions, contributing to the stagnant grade. Income inequality, reflected in our Gini coefficient of 0.67, underscores the urgency of substantive equality. Unemployment rates among different racial groups further emphasize the need for comprehensive reforms to achieving substantive equality. Our education, Section 29, has also faced profound challenges, with a grade remaining at E-, also very bad. Budget cuts, as mentioned by my colleague Daniela, budget cuts for the first time during a financial year, and systemic challenges such as contentious legislation like the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which continues to threaten language and cultural freedoms, and unequal language access. These have exacerbated these disparities, leaving many children without access to quality education. Gender inequalities still persist, with women being underrepresented in decision-making roles and men dominating managerial positions, hindering progress towards gender equality. Instances of violence and discrimination in educational settings demand urgent action to ensure equal access to quality education for all citizens. Now, turning our attention to human dignity, Section 10 of our Constitution. Sadly, we witness a decline from a grading of C- to D in 2023. As highlighted by my colleague Sean, escalating crime rates and socioeconomic challenges pose grave threats to the human dignity of all South Africans. For instance, the annual murder rate of 20,883 murders from January through to December have exacerbated this. Since 2016, 1,066 murders linked to police-issued firearms underscore the systemic failures of law enforcement. And along with other crime statistics, like attempted murder and assault, extreme poverty, inequality, and a staggeringly high unemployment rate of 35.3%, contributed to the erosion of human dignity, really exemplifying the grim reality many citizens face. Just to give you an idea of some of the stats that we picked up in changes during the year 2023, the change in the number of murder victims rose by 1.6%. The change in the number of attempted murder victims rose by 40.6%. The change in the number of assault GBH victims rose by 16.7%. And the number of learner-on-learner rapes in schools rose by an overall figure of 152. Now, additionally, the persisting issue of school pit toilets or pit latrines pose a risk to young learners' safety, directly infringing on their right to human dignity. Now, despite 20 billion rand spent over 13 years to eradicate these pit toilets, still over 66,000 school children in Limpopo rely on them. And this reflects a lack of political will and inefficiencies in addressing critical sanitation needs. The right to freedom and security of the person, Section 12 of the Constitution, persistent crime rates, as I've mentioned, and allegations of police inefficiency have led to a severe deterioration of this right, reflected in its D-, very poor grading, instances of gender-based violence, and reports of torture in prisons, including allegations of torture squads operating within the South African National Defence Force. These further underscore systemic failures threatening the safety and security of all South Africans. These allegations, if proven true, not only violate domestic law and international covenants, but also undermine public trust in state institutions. The right to privacy has regrettably declined from a B- to C in 2023 due to concerns over intrusive surveillance and the proposed General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill. Now, similarly, the rights to the freedom of religion, belief, and opinion, Section 15 of our Constitution, and freedom of expression, Section 16, have both deteriorated from B- to C, because proposed legislation, such as the hate speech bill, threatens to stifle legitimate discourse and dissent, undermining the vibrant exchange of ideas so essential for a robust democracy. And despite improvements in political rights, Section 19 of the Constitution, they still remain a work in progress, requiring continued vigilance to safeguard our democratic principles, especially now in the upcoming 2024 elections. Independent candidates and recent rulings from the Constitutional Court have added a layer of complexity to the political landscape, emphasizing the need for robust protection of political rights. Regrettably, the right to property, Section 25 of the Constitution, has deteriorated to D in 2023, raising concerns over proposed legislation that would legalize, as my colleague Daniela has said, that would legalize expropriation without compensation, and its potential impact on property rights and economic stability. And similarly, the right to housing, Section 26 of the Constitution, has deteriorated, underscoring the urgent need for effective measures to address homelessness and housing shortages. But if we look at the realm of healthcare, food, water, and social security, section 27, a downgrade from D- to E there reflects persistent challenges in the public health sector, demanding urgent action to ensure access to essential services. But sadly, the right to children, section 28 of the Constitution, highlighted ongoing challenges in protecting the rights and the welfare of children, particularly in the face of escalating crime rates and socioeconomic disparities. Now, despite the constitutional guarantee of a child's right to a name, nationality, and protection from maltreatment, abuse, or neglect, many children still remain undocumented due to bureaucratic hurdles. And moreover, high rates of child poverty, with a shocking 51% of children living in metric poverty in 2023, and more than 4.8 million children living below the poverty line, coupled with alarming crime statistics, necessitate urgent, comprehensive measures and community support networks. Regrettably, the right to cultural, religious, and linguistic communities, section 31, has also deteriorated, underscoring ongoing challenges in protecting the rights of diverse communities. So, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, what have we seen? Overall, the year 2023 has seen a deterioration in 16 out of 27 rights. No change in grading in 5 of 27 rights, and an improvement in grading in just 6 of 27 rights. So in conclusion, the Human Rights Report Card for 2023 is not merely just a reflection, but a call to action. It lays bare the stark realities of our human rights landscape, highlighting both progress and regression. So as we navigate through these challenges, let us not falter, but rather unite in our resolve to safeguard the dignity, equality, and freedoms of all individuals. Together, through our collective efforts and unwavering commitment, we can build a society where human rights are not just ideals, but lived realities for all citizens. I echo the vision iterated by our Executive Director, Klerk Foundation, who says so elegantly and eloquently, let us make our constitutional democracy a reality for all South Africans. Thank you.